I've been working security at Millstone Brewery for about 3 years now. It's one of those old converted warehouses downtown. Exposed brick, high ceilings, the whole industrial aesthetic thing. During the day, it's bustling with tour groups and beer enthusiasts. At night, it's a different world entirely. My shift starts at 11 p.m. and ends at 7 a.m. Most nights, it's just me, my flashlight, and the occasional ping from the security monitors. I do my rounds every hour, check the brewing floor, the storage areas, the loading dock. It's monotonous work, but the pay is decent, and I'm a natural night owl anyway. This happened about 6 months ago, on a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesdays are always dead quiet. No late-night brewing scheduled, no maintenance crews. Just me. I was doing my 2 a.m. round, walking through the main brewing floor. The fermentation tanks loom like sleeping giants in the darkness, and my flashlight beam cuts through the shadows between them. I've done this walk hundreds of times. I know every sound. The hum of the refrigeration units, the occasional drip of condensation, the creak of metal expanding and contracting with temperature changes. But that night, something felt off. I can't explain it exactly. You know that feeling when you walk into a room and sense that someone's been there recently? Like the air is still disturbed? It was like that, except stronger. The hair on my arm stood up, and I felt this pressure in my chest, like the air had gotten thicker somehow. I kept walking, telling myself I was being ridiculous. My boots echoed on the concrete floor, too loud in the silence. As I approached the corridor leading to the barrel room, I swept my flashlight ahead out of habit. That's when I saw it. Standing in the doorway to the barrel room was a figure. Humanoid, but wrong. So wrong. My brain tried to make sense of it for a split second. Maybe it was a person. Maybe someone had broken in. Maybe it was one of the brewers who'd stayed late. But even as those thoughts flickered through my mind, I knew they weren't true. The thing stood about 6.5 feet tall. Its body was covered in dark, matted hair. Not like a costume, but thick and organic, covering most of its upper torso. But it was the arms that made my blood turn to ice. They were too long, impossibly long. They hung past its knees, past where they should have ended, with fingers that seemed to stretch into the darkness. The proportions were all wrong, like someone had taken a human form and stretched it in all the wrong places. My flashlight beam hit it directly, and for one eternal second, we just looked at each other. I couldn't see its eyes clearly through all that hair, but I felt them on me, watching, studying. Then I blinked. I didn't mean to. It was an involuntary thing, the kind of automatic response your body does when you're staring at something too long. My eyes closed for maybe half a second. When they opened, the doorway was empty. I stood there, frozen, my flashlight shaking in my hand. The beam wavered across the empty doorway, illuminating nothing but the dark with the barrel room beyond. My heart was hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. I did what every security guard is trained not to do. I ran. I'm not proud of it, but some instinct older than training took over. I backed away slowly at first, keeping my light on that doorway, then turned and fast walked back to the security office. By the time I reached it, I was practically sprinting. I locked myself in and pulled up the camera feeds with shaking hands. The barrel room, the brewing floor, the corridors. I cycled through every single camera, looking for any sign of that thing. Nothing. The footage from the brewing floor showed me walking, stopping, pointing my flashlight at the doorway, then backing away. But in the doorway itself, nothing, just an empty space. I spent the rest of that shift in the office, watching the monitors with the door locked. When my relief showed up at 7 a.m., I tried to act normal, but I must have looked like hell because he asked me 3 times if I was okay. I told him I'd had a rough night. I didn't mention what I'd seen. Who would believe me? The thing is, I still work there. I need the job, and part of me, the stubborn part, refuses to let whatever that was drive me away. But I've changed my patrol route. I haven't walked past that doorway at 2 a.m. since. And sometimes when I'm sitting in the security office late at night, watching the monitors, I see movement in my peripheral vision on the screen showing the barrel room. But when I look directly at it, there's nothing there, just an empty doorway. I worked as a night watchman for a private estate outside of town. 50 acres of woods, gardens, and one massive main house that belonged to some retired tech executive who was paranoid about security. My job was simple. Drive the perimeter road every 2 hours, check the gates, make sure nobody was trying to break in or camp on the property. The money was excellent. The isolation was absolute. I started in October, and by December, I'd settled into a comfortable routine. The property owner was almost never there. He had homes in 3 different states. So most nights, it was just me and the empty house looming against the trees. It was a Friday in mid-December when it happened. Cold night, clear sky, the kind of night where the stars are so bright they almost hurt to look at. I was doing my midnight patrol, driving slowly along the perimeter road with my windows cracked, listening to a podcast. I was about halfway through the circuit when I heard it. A woman scream, not a startled yelp or a shout, a full-throated, terror-filled scream that cut through the night like a knife. It came from somewhere ahead of me, toward the main entrance gate at the end of the long driveway. Help me? Please, someone help me. My blood went cold. I punched the gas, my patrol truck bouncing over the uneven road as I raced toward the sound. My hands were already reaching for my radio, calling it in. This is Watchmen at the Hendricks estate. I have a woman screaming for help near the front gate, requesting immediate police response. The dispatcher's voice crackled back, professional and calm. Copy that. Units are being dispatched. Do not approach if you feel unsafe. But I could still hear her. The screaming was continuous now, desperate, the kind of sound that bypasses your brain and hits something primal in your chest. Please, he's going to kill me. Help. I rounded the bend and saw the gate ahead, illuminated by the security lights. I scanned the area frantically as I skidded to a stop, my high beams cutting across the driveway. Nothing. No one was there. I threw the truck into park and grabbed my flashlight, stepping out into the cold. The screaming had stopped the moment my truck stopped moving. The silence that replaced it was somehow worse, thick and oppressive, like the night was holding its breath. Hello, I called out, sweeping my flashlight across the trees, the gate, the road beyond. Ma'am, can you hear me? I'm here to help. Nothing, just the wind moving through the bare branches. I moved forward cautiously, every nerve in my body screaming at me to get back in the truck. I checked behind the gate posts, along the tree line, even walked 100 feet down the public road in both directions. There was no one, no footprints in the frost-covered grass, no signs of a struggle, no woman. That's when I heard the sirens approaching. Within 5 minutes, 2 patrol cars arrived, lights flashing. Then another. By the time the response was finished, there were 4 police cars, and I could hear the helicopter in the distance, its spotlights sweeping through the trees. The officers took my statement. They searched the entire property, all 50 acres. The helicopter did thermal imaging sweeps. They had dogs tracking scent paths. They found absolutely nothing. No woman, no signs of disturbance, no evidence that anyone had been there at all. One of the officers, an older guy with kind eyes, pulled me aside around 3 a.m. "Son, are you sure about what you heard?" "I heard her," I insisted. "Clear as I'm hearing you now. She was screaming for help. She said someone was going to kill her." He nodded slowly, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. "How long have you been working nights?" 3 months. "You've been getting enough sleep?" I understood what he was implying, and I didn't like it. "I know what I heard." "I believe you believe that," he said carefully. "But we've been over every inch of this property. There's no one here." After they left, I sat in my truck at the end of the driveway until sunrise. I kept the engine running, the doors locked, and my eyes on the trees. I quit 2 weeks later. But here's the thing that still keeps me up at night. I did some research before I left. Turns out, that property has had 4 different security companies in the last 6 years. Every single one of them ended their contract early, and none of them would say why. I also found an old newspaper article from 1987. A woman went missing while jogging on the rural road that runs past the property. They found her car abandoned near where the estate's main gate is now. She was never found. I don't know what I heard that night. Maybe it was my mind playing tricks. Maybe it was some kind of acoustic anomaly. Maybe it was a wind. But I know what it sounded like. It sounded like someone being murdered. I never thought I'd end up working security at a retirement home, but life has a funny way of humbling you. The Sisters of Mercy long-term care facility was a specialized place. It housed retired nuns and clergy members, people who'd spent their entire lives in service to the church. Most of them were in their 80s and 90s. Many had dementia or Alzheimer's. The building itself was old, built in the 1920s as a convent before being converted into a care facility. High ceilings, long corridors with tile floors that echoed every footstep, and tall windows that looked out over the grounds. During the day, it had a peaceful quality. At night, it felt like a different building entirely. My shift was 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. Most of the residents would be asleep by the time I arrived, though you'd occasionally hear someone wander in the halls or talking to themselves. That was normal. The staff had warned me that dementia patients sometimes got confused at night, thought they were young again, looked for people who'd been dead for decades. I'd been working there for about 6 weeks when I met Sister Margaret. She was in her late 80s, barely 5 feet tall, and had severe dementia. The day staff told me she'd been a Latin teacher at a Catholic high school for 40 years before retiring. Now, she mostly sat in her wheelchair, staring out the window or muttering to herself in Latin. "She's harmless," one of the nurses told me, "but don't let her get to you at night. She sometimes says weird things." I didn't think much of it at the time. It was a Thursday night in February when everything changed. I was doing my rounds on the 3rd floor around 2 a.m. Most of the hall lights were dimmed for night, leaving long shadows between the pools of illumination. I could hear the usual sounds: someone snoring, the hum of medical equipment, the occasional beep of a monitor. That's when I heard the wheelchair, the squeak of unoiled wheels on tile, moving slowly down the hallway toward me. I turned and saw Sister Margaret, propelling herself forward with her feet, her thin legs barely reaching the floor. She was moving with more purpose than I'd ever seen from her, her head up, eyes wide and staring straight ahead. "Sister Margaret?" I called softly, not wanting to startle her. "It's pretty late. Can I help you get back to your room?" She didn't respond, just kept wheeling herself forward, past me, toward the large window at the end of the hallway. I followed her, keeping a respectful distance. Sometimes the best thing to do with dementia patients was to let them do what they needed to do, within reason, then gently redirect them. She stopped at the window. The blinds were open, showing the grounds 3 stories below and the tree line beyond, all of it bathed in pale moonlight. Sister Margaret stared out that window for a long moment. I was about to suggest we head back to her room when she raised one skeletal finger and pointed at the glass. Then she started screaming, "Omega! Omega! Omega!" Not the confused calling of an elderly patient, not a scared cry for help. This was something else entirely, a sound that came from somewhere deep in her chest, raw and primal and wrong. Her voice was too strong for a frail body, too loud, resonating in a way that made the hair on my neck stand straight up. It was the most horrifying sound I'd ever heard. Next level Silent Hill, never sleep again stuff. She kept pointing at the window, her finger trembling, her eyes wide and unblinking, reflecting the moonlight like mirrors. "Omega! Omega! Omega!" I stumbled backward, my hand instinctively reaching for my radio. Other residents were waking up now, their confused voices adding to the chaos. Doors were opening. The night nurse came running. Sister Margaret. The nurse rushed past me, kneeling beside the wheelchair. "It's okay, honey. You're safe. You're safe." But Sister Margaret wouldn't stop. She kept screaming that word, kept pointing at the window with that shaking finger. Her eyes never blinked, never left whatever she was seeing out there in the darkness. The nurse tried to move her, but Sister Margaret's hand shot out and grabbed the window sill with surprising strength. Her knuckles went white. She was screaming so hard that spittle flew from her lips. "Omega!" I finally gathered enough courage to look at the window, to see what she was pointing at. There was nothing there, just the empty grounds, the trees, the moon, nothing. It took 3 of us to finally get Sister Margaret away from that window. She fought us every step of the way, still screaming, still trying to point. Her voice had gone hoarse, but she wouldn't stop. They had to sedate her. Even as the medication took effect, even as her voice faded to a whisper, she kept trying to lift her arm, kept trying to point. "Omega," she whispered, her eyes finally closing. "Omega, Omega." The nurse, a woman named Carol who'd worked there for 15 years, was shaking. "I've never seen her like that," she said. "Never." I went back to the window after they'd taken Sister Margaret to the medical wing. I stood exactly where her wheelchair had been and looked out at the grounds, trying to see what she'd seen. Nothing, just darkness and trees and moonlight. But I felt it, that same feeling I'd had at the brewery, like the air was heavier somehow, like something was watching back. I pulled down the blinds and walked away. Sister Margaret died 3 days later. Heart attack, they said. Natural causes. She was 87. Her time had come. But I can't stop thinking about it. Omega, the last letter of the Greek alphabet. The end. In the Bible, Christ is called the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. What did she see out that window? What was ending? I still work at the facility, but I avoid that hallway at night when I can. And I never, ever open the blinds on that window. Some things are better left unseen. Warehouses are inherently creepy at night. I don't care who you are. If you've ever walked through one after dark, when all the lights are off except for the emergency exits, you know what I'm talking about. They're too big, too empty, with too many shadows and too many places for your imagination to run wild. I'd been working security at Cold Stream Distribution for about 8 months when this happened. It's a food distribution warehouse. Massive place, about 200,000 square feet, with rows and rows of industrial shelving units filled with pallets. And in the back, there's a walk-in freezer. This thing is huge, big enough to drive a forklift into. Temperature kept at a constant -10 degrees. They store frozen goods in there for restaurants and grocery stores across the region. Part of my nightly routine is to check that freezer. Make sure the temperature is stable. The door is sealed properly. No alarms going off. It's one of those industrial doors with a big lever handle and an emergency release on the inside in case someone gets locked in. I've checked that freezer hundreds of times. Middle of the night, completely alone, and never thought twice about it. Until that night. It was a Wednesday in March. Dead quiet, exactly the kind of shift I liked. I'd done my first 2 rounds without incident. At 3 a.m., I started my 3rd round, working my way from the front office through the warehouse toward the freezer section in the back. The warehouse was silent except for my footsteps and the distant hum of refrigeration units. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness between the shelving units. Everything was exactly as it should be. I reached the freezer around 3:12 a.m. I know the exact time because I logged in my report later, and the timestamp is burned into my memory. The temperature display read -10 degrees, normal. The door was sealed tight, normal. No alarm lights flashing, normal. I put my hand on the lever, about to do my standard check, where I crack the door, flash my light inside, confirm everything looks good, then seal it back up. That's when I heard it, knocking, from inside the freezer. 3 slow, deliberate knocks, metal on metal, bang, bang, bang. My hand froze on the lever. Every muscle in my body went rigid. Someone was inside the freezer. Someone was knocking on the inside of the freezer door. My mind raced. I checked this freezer at 1 a.m. just 2 hours ago. It had been empty. The door had been sealed. I'd been the only person in the building all night, and I'd been watching the monitors. No one had entered. No one could be inside, but someone was knocking. Bang, bang, bang. Louder this time. More insistent. My training kicked in. If someone was trapped inside, they'd freeze to death within minutes if I didn't act. I grabbed the lever with both hands. Then I stopped. Something was wrong. The knocking wasn't frantic. It wasn't panicked. It was measured, rhythmic, almost patient. No one trapped in a freezer at -10 degrees would knock like that. They'd be pounding, screaming, desperate. Bang, bang, bang. I backed away from the door. My hand went to my radio, then hesitated. What would I even say? That I heard knocking from a freezer I just checked 2 hours ago? That I knew was empty? I stood there in the darkness, my flashlight pointing at that sealed door, sweat running down my back despite the cold air radiating from the freezer unit. The knocking stopped. Silence. Complete and total silence. I waited. 1 minute. 2 minutes. 5. Nothing. I forced myself to think logically. Maybe it was the metal expanding or contracting with temperature changes. Maybe something had shifted on the other side of the door. Maybe there was a mechanical issue I didn't understand. I grabbed the lever again and yanked it down. The door swung open with a hiss of frozen air. A cloud of condensation billowed out, momentarily obscuring my view. I raised my flashlight, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. The freezer was empty, completely empty. I stepped inside, my breath immediately turned to fog in the frigid air. I swept my flashlight across every surface. The walls, the ceiling, the floor. Nothing, just empty space and the metal walls coated in frost. No one was there. Nothing was there. I walked deeper inside, checking the corners, looking for anything that might have made that sound. Maybe a loose panel, maybe a piece of equipment, anything. That's when the door slammed shut behind me. The sound echoed through the metal box like a gunshot. I spun around, but not before I heard it. The lever on the outside engaging, sealing me in. No. I ran to the door and hit the emergency release. The mechanism was designed to override the outside lock, to prevent exactly the situation. I pulled it. Nothing happened. I pulled it again. Harder. The release lever moved, but the door stayed sealed. The temperature readout inside showed -10 degrees and dropping. I had minutes, maybe 5, maybe less. I pounded on the door with my fists, screaming for help even though I knew I was alone. The metal was so cold it burned my skin. Help! Someone help me. And then, from the other side of the door, I heard it again. Bang, bang, bang. Someone was knocking on the outside of the door now. The same rhythm, the same patient measured cadence. Let me out! I screamed. Please. Bang, bang, bang. I grabbed the emergency release again, yanked it with everything I had. This time, something gave. The door swung open, and I fell through it, landing hard on the concrete floor outside. I scrambled away from the freezer on my hands and knees, gasping for air, my lungs burning from the frozen atmosphere. I spun around, looking for whoever had been on the other side of that door. No one was there. The warehouse stretched away in all directions, empty and silent. My flashlight had fallen and was rolling in slow circles on the floor, its beams sweeping across the shadows. I was completely alone. I grabbed my flashlight and ran. I didn't stop until I reached the security office. I locked myself inside and pulled up the camera feeds with shaking hands. The camera pointed at the freezer showed me approaching, opening the door, stepping inside, then the door closing. A few seconds later, it showed me falling out and running away, but there was no one else. The camera showed no one closing that door, no one knocking. The door had closed by itself. The knocking had come from nowhere. I quit that night, sent my resignation email before my shift was even over. I didn't give 2 weeks' notice. I didn't wait for a response. I just left. The warehouse manager called me the next day, trying to convince me to stay. Said they'd review the incident, check the freezer door mechanism, make sure it was safe. I told him I wasn't coming back. He got quiet for a moment, then said something that made my blood run cold. You're the third guard we've lost this year, all because of that freezer. I asked him what he meant. He hesitated. Nothing. Never mind. Good luck with your next job. And he hung up. I've done some digging since then. Found out that warehouse was built on the site of an old meat packing plant from the 1940s. Found out there was an accident in 1947. A worker got trapped in the freezer. They didn't find him for 3 days. The article said they could tell he'd been alive for hours before he froze to death because of the scratches on the inside of the door and the handprints. I don't work security anymore. I'm doing day shifts at a retail store now. The pay is worse, but I sleep better. Because I know one thing for certain. Whatever was in that warehouse, whatever was knocking on that freezer door, it wasn't trying to get out. It was trying to let me in.